Welcome to a Telltale Books video. This one I'm starting a new series, and I'm premiering it on YouTube on the date that I have chosen because it happens to be his birthday anniversary. The author in question is Alfred Bester, who occupies kind of an odd place in the history of science fiction. Now, I'll get into that in a minute, but Alfred Bester was born on December 18th, 1913, and he died September 30th, 1987. And he was born in New York City. He had quite a widely varied career. When he first started writing, he had gone to school for psychology, but he spent most of his life as a writer and an editor, and got involved in writing for television and writing for comic books, mostly for DC Comics. So I'm reading here where he was working on Superman and Batman and the Green Lantern, Captain Marvel, and also wrote for radio, scripting shows for Charlie Chan and The Shadow. So he was doing, and television series. He wrote scripts for Tom Corbett's Space Cadet. So he wrote a great deal outside of the traditional science fiction magazines and novels, which explains why he really doesn't have all that many stories. My bibliography only lists 56 of them. Two of those were published, there are a bunch of them that were published after his death. So he'll be one of the shorter authors that I do a deep dive in, but I'm going to do a deep dive through his work, and yes, I'll get to talking about it in a minute. His first short story, which I want to get into detail in this video. But before that, I want to get into the fact that his most famous works are The Demolished Man, which was the first Hugo Award-winning novel. The very first Hugo Awards ceremony awarded The Demolished Man the Hugo for Best Novel. And he followed that up a couple years later. I don't know if he won I don't think he won a Hugo for it, but he followed The Demolished Man up with The Star's My Destination, which a lot of people prefer the title Tiger, but it is probably best known as The Star's My Destination because all the U.S. publishers have always used that title, so that's mostly what you see. And he did publish some other novels. The Computer Connection, when I first started reading, I remember Golem 100 being published, and The Deceivers, Psycho Shop, and a couple of non-genre novels also. He also did write a number of short stories which have been very highly regarded. Adam and No Eve, The Push of a Finger, Starlight Starbright, Time is the Traitor, Fondly Fahrenheit. Those are The Men Who Murdered Muhammad. Those are all highly regarded short stories. So from his small output, we have a lot of stories that are considered to be classics. In 1988, the SFWA made Bester the 9th SFWA Grand Master just before his death. And the Science Fiction and Fantasy Hall of Fame inducted him in 2001. Like I said, he won the Hugo Award for The Demolished Man. He also had nominations for Starlight Starbright, The Man Who Murdered Muhammad, The Pie Man, The 4-Hour Fugue, and The Computer Connection, which is a novel published in 1978. So he got into publishing science fiction with a short story titled The Broken Axiom in April of 1939, and that's what I want to talk about for the rest of this video. And the story about this short story, it was entered into a contest that Thrilling Wonder Stories was putting on, and the story that I've heard related a lot is that Robert Heinlein also wanted to submit a story to this contest, but then he learned that the contest was only paying $50 to the winner, and John W. Campbell would have paid him for his story $70 if he could get Campbell to buy it. And so he did. He submitted it to Campbell. Campbell loved it and bought it. And that was the story Lifeline. That was Heinlein's first published story. So it's hard to say then, if Heinlein would have stayed in that contest, would Alfred Bester have won? But Heinlein did not submit to that contest. Alfred Bester did, and he won. And he was published then in the April 1939 issue of Thrilling Wonder Stories, The Broken Axiom. The Broken Axiom is about a scientist who develops matter transmission, builds an apparatus, he tests it out, he successfully transmits a mouse across the room to his receiving station. And the mouse comes through it alive, perfectly okay. So everything seems kosher. So true to 1939 science fiction, he's going to put himself through the matter transmitter. These days, no, you wouldn't. You wouldn't be allowed to. You'd have to do 10 years of testing before you'd be allowed to use it on human subjects. And even then, you'd probably run into all kinds of legal issues and regulatory issues that block you from being able to even try it. Anyway, he goes ahead and transmits himself. But he comes through the other side and wakes up and goes to get up and finds himself putting his hand right through the table he's on. He gets down on the floor and he sinks into the floor down to his knees. The transmitter, in putting him back together, spaced his atoms out more than the space that atoms normally would have. They're spaced out a bit. Okay, right away, all kinds of scientific red flags on this story, but it's science fiction. Okay, just go with it. It wasn't published in Astounding, so we can give it some passes on inaccuracies. Anyway, the next thing the scientists notices is that there are these red clouds, and they seem to move intelligently. And a bunch of them seem to come and start checking him out. And he realizes he's seeing a completely separate world that coexists with our own world, with its own intelligent or semi-intelligent creatures living there. Right away, this started reminding me of the Plattner story by H.G. Wells, where this guy is seeing this world coexisting with ours. So that makes the story interesting. I love the Plattner story, and this story, it's it's not a ripoff of Wells, but it seems to have been inspired by it, and it's enough like it that it's kind of the same sort of thing. And it makes it interesting to me for that reason. I like the way Wells handled his story and this alternate world coexisting with ours. I thought that was a really cool idea, and I think it's a really cool idea here. Bester throws some interesting other things into it. Unfortunately, the story is too much a 1930s science fiction story. Too many things that just you read it and you go, really? Come on. Like the idea of putting a human being right away through a matter transmitter without any kind of regulatory issues, or just kind of the way how the story ends also brings it down to the level of typical 1930s science fiction and makes it a little bit amateurish feeling. And definitely, I've read other Bester works, mostly later works, and the writing is top notch. The writing here feels like a first story. It feels like somebody who's just starting out and trying out and doesn't really have a good grasp on writing yet. It feels kind of amateurish, which of course pretty much everything written in the 1930s science fiction magazines felt that way. It's a little bit simple. And of course the characters, they're simple characters. You don't get any kind of deep characterization here. You learn enough about them to move the story along with its idea, and no background to the characters. Interesting side world that he enters into with this accident. I thought that was really cool. Hot chocolate, gotta have it in Wisconsin at this time of year. It's December. Actually, a warm weekend. I went down to Sheboygan yesterday. It was 60 degrees. Had to take my coat off because it was so warm. I was sitting in my car in line waiting for emissions testing, and just was unbelievably warm. 60 degrees in December. You just don't see that. Very unusual. Anyway, I thought it was an enjoyable story, but I wouldn't recommend it to anybody that does not enjoy typical 1930s science fiction. If you don't enjoy that simpler, kind of naive sort of science fiction from back then, where the science was totally bogus and the characters were kind of flat and stock, but you had some cool ideas. But the plots either didn't go much of anywhere, or if there was a stronger plot, it was mostly full of holes. That's kind of typical of 1930s. This is not the worst of those. This is a little bit a notch above typical 1930s, but still, it isn't Campbell's Astounding yet. It isn't where Alfred Bester would go, and it's certainly not The Demolished Man. If you've read The Demolished Man or The Star's My Destination and you love those works by Bester, and you go and read The Broken Axiom, you're probably going to go, what? It's just nowhere near the same level of writing. So I don't have The Broken Axiom in a physical edition. I read it in a free PDF of Thrilling Wonders stories online. It's out there, hunt for it. And you can read The Broken Axiom if you really want to, if you love that old time science fiction from way back. Not even from my childhood, it's from my dad's childhood, This stuff isn't too far from being 100 years old. It's like, what, 84 years old? Old stories. So have you read The Broken Axiom? Leave comments. Tell me what you thought. Leave other comments about Alfred Bester. And come on back. I'm going to be going through as much as I can get my hands on by Alfred Bester. Everything I can get my hands on by Alfred Bester in order of publication, as well as all the other authors I've got going on. I've got a long list now. And I hope you'll join me. And happy birthday to Alfred Bester. And I'll be here for more.